coming up.
Excuse me, who first contacted you about the CBSA investigation? If you've been threatened, now is your time to share details. And I would well imagine the people you believed were threatening Diane daily were her friends, Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald. Am I correct?
Now, we had heard testimony along the way that Minister Mendicino wanted someone's head on a platter over the Arrive scam scandal.
You were promoted 2 weeks after her suspension. When did you apply for this promotion or put your name in for the promotion?
So I'm very concerned that if I tell the truth here, I'm going to lose my job. She also stated that I have been muzzled for some time now.
No wonder no one wants to talk about the practices at CBSA. We heard from the CBSA union president who talked about a culture of corruption at the CBSA because people are afraid to talk out and call out the abuses of integrity.
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
We were accused of asking her to provide false statements to CBSA personnel in response to their request for her to appear as a witness in their investigation regarding ArriveCan. I want to be very clear about Ms. Daly's statements in this regard. They are false. Neither of us asked Diane Daly to engage in dishonest activities. On the contrary, we offered our support during what we understood to be a personally difficult time for her. On December 14, 2023, I explained to Ms. Daly that her participation as a witness to the CBSA investigation was necessary as part of her job duties. I offered to accompany her, facilitated her request to have a union representative or her sister join her at the meeting, and regularly checked on her well-being before and after her meeting with CBSA investigators. Further, between December 23 and March 2024, I responded to several questions raised by Ms. Daly regarding her rights and obligations, either as a witness or as a respondent of internal investigations. This included providing her guidance on legal assistance and representation by her union. I also took extra precautions to ensure that both her and my confidentiality obligations were respected concerning this file. In March 2024, when the employee and I were informed that she was a respondent in a PSPC internal investigation, I reiterated my support and answered all her questions, reassuring her that while she was being removed from her procurement duties, she was on leave with pay. Mr. Chair, my involvement with the ArriveCan file is limited to my interactions with Ms. Daly and her as her Director General during the period when the CBSA and PSPC initiated internal investigations, so specifically between December 2023 and March 2024. It should be noted that I was not an employee of PSPC's procurement branch during the ArriveCan procurement process and have no involvement with the related companies or associated contracts. Mr. von Schoenberg's involvement with the ArriveCan file was very brief and consisted in participating in the 30-minute meeting mentioned by Ms. Daly during her appearance before this committee. He attended the meeting in his capacity as her senior director at the time, with the sole responsibility of informing Ms. Daly of the necessity for her to cooperate with the CBSA's investigation. That is the full extent of Mr. von Schoenberg's involvement on this matter. The false allegations made at this committee on August 7th have called our professional integrity into question and have the potential to undermine our reputations. In my case, this reputation was built over 30 years of flawless professional work in both the private and public sectors, in Canada and abroad. Both Tom and I are committed to fair, open, and transparent public procurements that provide best value to Canadians. I have particular interest in solicitations for professional services given my role as Director General of a new sector within PSPC, created in April 2024 to transform procurement in this commodity area. Mr. Chair, we are grateful for the opportunity today to correct the record and clear names of the defamatory information presented to this committee on August 7th.
Ms. Bolduc, I'm going to be asking you some pretty simple but very important questions. I appreciate straightforward answers. We don't want talking points. We don't want to be continued to be misled by officials at PSPC and CBSA. You got caught up in this mess. We, as a committee, want to know how this Arrive scam grew from an initial $80,000 app to at least $60 million with no accountability from this government. I realize you're not part of the Arrive Can app, but this, as the more we dig into these issues and interview witnesses, the more we find layers of misdeeds, collusion with top-level executives pointing the finger down the line. Frankly, we've been misled by senior officials on a number of occasions in a number of committees. This goes for deputy ministers and likely ministers that they are protecting. You've had weeks to prepare for this committee meeting, and we're looking for answers. Canadians deserve nothing but the truth. Yes or no, you've had weeks to prepare. Have you received any coaching at all or any material to review in advance of your testimony today?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. So I have sought and I have received counseling in order to prepare for this committee. This is the first time that I appear at a parliamentary committee, and I wanted to know about the etiquette. If the question is asked,
who counseled you?
The accountant.
Who counseled you?
So people who are in.
Who counseled you?
So essentially the unit that prepares these witnesses to come to the committee. So in terms of material to come to this committee, no, this is my material.
Okay.
This is okay.
Okay. I want you to name the officials that prepped you for this testimony.
Okay, so that's the unit essentially that.
What's the unit called?
It's the unit that liaises with this committee essentially.
Okay, at PSPC?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Did you talk with Ms. Reza?
No,
the
not
Deputy
at all.
Minister?
No, I did not.
In advance of this meeting and preparing for this meeting, you did not?
So thank you, Mr. Chair. I did
Yes
not.
or no? Yes or no? Did you talk with Aaron O'Gorman at CBSA?
Point d'ordre, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Je comprends.
With all due respect, I understand that my colleague wants to put several questions, but with interpreting, there's always a bit of a delay, and I would ask that they show more respect so that we can get the simultaneous interpretation.
Genuous, we're going to be here for a little bit of time. I expect there's going to be some Mr. Genuous, you're not the chair. I'm perfectly capable of seeing this through. Mr. Brock, if you could just take your foot off the gas just a little bit. I know you want to get as much time in. Madame Bolduc, and I know this is your first time appearing. I just want to just tell the witnesses a couple things here. The time belongs to the members. So if you are interrupted because they feel your questions are too lengthy or going in direction, I'd ask you just to respect their time. I'm going to assume that all your answers are through the chair, so you don't need to repeat that. Having said that, you are entitled to take a second to answer the question. You certainly, we're not trying to get a rapid fire here. Mr. Brock, if I could ask you just to kind of recognize there are interpreters here as well. Having said that, we are familiar with your rapid style. We know it's one that you use effectively, and the floor is yours for 3 minutes and 40 seconds, please.
Bolduc, excuse me, who first contacted you about the CBSA investigation?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I was contacted by the Human Resources unit of my department, and my understanding is that they were contacted by the investigation of the CBSA.
Contact you?
I spoke to Michael Lafleur. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I spoke to Michel Lafleur for the very first time on December 13, 2020.
December, sorry?
December 13th.
13th?
Yes,
okay.
2023. Yeah.
You were aware of the exchange of communication between Mr. Lafleur and Ms. Daly leading up to your intervention?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. No. December 13, 2023 is the first time that I was made aware of an investigation.
Okay, Mr. Lafleur,
and
hold on, this is my time, ma'am. Mr. Lafleur didn't inform you that he was communicating with Ms. Daly before he spoke with you?
Thank you for the question. He informed me for the first time on December 13, 2023.
Okay. And did he inform you that it was an offer to attend, an invitation to attend, as opposed to a mandatory requirement? Did he tell you that?
Thank you for the question. No, he did not tell me that. In fact, I learned it the following day when I spoke to Ms. Daly.
Right. So ultimately, this correspondence goes back and forth between Daly and Lafleur. Lafleur is giving her the impression, because I've got the emails, it's clearly an invitation, it's not a requirement. She says no. She speaks very highly and positively about the work ethic, the integrity, the character of Mr. Utano, Mr. McDonald. She doesn't want to get involved. She specifically confirms people who have lied at committee. She outs Aaron O'Gorman, who we've caught in numerous lies. This is the president of the CBSA who took it upon herself to lie to a parliamentary committee. She called her out. She called out Min Doan, who has also lied throughout numerous committees. You were aware of that, weren't you?
Thank you,
That was brought to your attention?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've followed this committee. I've also followed other committees, so I'm aware
Yes.
of what was said at those
So
committees.
at the time that you get involved, you're actually on vacation. You're actually at least 5 levels above that of Miss Daly, right? You're a director general, right? Miss Daly is I believe an EX1, maybe you're an EX5 or EX6. So very, very unusual, because she doesn't report to you. She reports to at least 3 people between you, and all of a sudden, the president of the CBA is very interested in Miss Daly, and your deputy minister, Reza, is very interested. They ask you specifically to cancel your vacation, get back to Ottawa, and put pressure on Miss Daly to participate in an interview. That's how it went down, didn't it?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I was not on vacation. I was actually on certified medical leave.
Okay.
And the reason why I took this call, as I took many other calls during my medical leave, because my ankle was broken, but my head was working.
Speaking of medical issues, you were aware Ms. Daly had been diagnosed with cancer in the fall of 2023. She informed her superiors about that. You knew that going into your intervention, didn't you?
Thank you very much for the question. I'd like to go back to the question about my first intervention with Mr. Michel Lafleur. So Michel Lafleur contacted me on December 13th. And on December 13th, he explained to me that as audits and evaluations have confirmed and documented, there were missing pieces of information. And as part of their investigation, they wanted to have a witness appear in front of them in order to fill in the gaps.
Thank you very much. That is the time.
Can you each tell me who you report to at the PSPC? Is it Deputy Minister Arian Reza or DMA Michael Mills?
So I report to ADM Dominique Laporte, myself, and so I'm a Director General. So specifically, earlier statements were made. I'm an EX3, and Ms. Daly is a PG5. So Ms. Daly, there would be a Senior Director, an EX2, between me and then a manager, and then Ms. Daly. And so in an instance, to get back to an earlier question where there would be something out of the ordinary on a human resource file. It is something that I do on a regular basis to actually meet with my employees, even if they are several levels below me, when something so important as an investigation, for instance, is happening. And for example, in instances where I know that somebody is going through something difficult in their personal lives, I would make actually a point of meeting with them and making sure that they understand that they're supported by their organization. So that's why I would meet with a person like Ms. Daly on an occasion like an investigation by a different department on something so high profile as ArriveCan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Who do you think she would have reported to in that instance when she describes senior managers of PBIPS and PSPC managers?
So thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I believe at the time she worked for the CBSA.
Thank you very much. Ms. Daly is currently on administrative leave and was under investigation, as you made previously commented, by PSCP and CBSA. Are these investigations ongoing?
Thank you for the question. I believe so.
In this instance, and if there's new information that arises from her testimony related to that investigation, is there any additional facts to her testimony that you'd like to submit here today in relation to that study regarding the internal investigation?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. No.
Ms. Daly alleges that she was placed on leave for retaliatory reasons. How do you respond to the allegations that she was placed on leave because she refused to provide false testimony?
Thank you very much for the question. As I stated in my opening remarks, at no point did either Tom or myself ask Ms. Daly to make false statement. On the contrary, we offered our support. Thank you.
When was that discussion where you offered the support?
Thank you for the question. I offered her the support on December 14, 2023.
And how long was that from the time and period to which she says she raised these claims with PSPC?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. I don't know, because like you're suggesting January 2020, again, I don't know.
Well, she's suggesting that period of time, but I understand if you deny that fact, correct? That she ever raised concerns with senior managers.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. About CBSA, when we were in our roles, no.
Interesting.
No.
Do you recall the conversation that Ms. Daly is speaking about in regards to the moment where she had been that feared retaliation if she didn't give false testimony? Do you recall that conversation?
For the question, Mr. Chair, I do recall a conversation that I had with Ms. Daly. My recollection, again, was that we were genuinely offering our support at a time where it was particularly difficult for her.
How long was that meeting?
Thank you. I'm afraid, Mr. Visually, that is the time we will come back to. Certainly. Beginning our second round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor again for 5 minutes.
Ms. Polduck, when did you find out that your Teams meeting with Ms. Daly and Mr. Schoenberg was actually recorded?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. When I watched the committee proceeds the night that it occurred on August 7th.
And I trust that you haven't had access to any transcript, you haven't had access to the actual recording itself. I appreciate your memory may not be as sharp as it would be if I were asking you what you did last night. So I'll go through some of the details, all right? Because the impression I'm hearing about you being so managerial-like and concerned regarding her well-being, et cetera, can be interpreted differently. So I'm going to go through a couple of areas. One thing that really caught my eye is your confirmation. This is a 17-minute conversation. Literally within the first minute and a half, you use these words. I know that you did exchange briefly with the CBA in recent weeks. I know and you know they're probably explained that they're carrying out an investigation on the allegations that are targeting individuals, two individuals within the CBSA. A very interesting use of the word, targeting, because that's precisely what the evidence has shown, that government and senior managers, deputy managers, and ADMs have looked for fall people to take the blame for this $60 million boondoggle. And there are consequences when people speak out against power, when people speak out against authority. They end up suspended, sometimes without pay. So I'm glad you used the word targeting, because that's the first confirmation that Justin Trudeau and his government and his public servants are deliberately targeting individuals to take the blame for this boondoggle. That's one observation. Second observation, you said their investigation includes everything that they're able to put their hands on. There's a couple of holes. Another interesting angle. You asked very early on whether Daly was threatened. And you didn't say that once. You didn't say it twice. You didn't say it 3 times. In 17 minutes, Ms. Bulldog, you reiterate, if you've been threatened, now is your time to share details. And I would well imagine the people you believed were threatening Diane Daly were her friends, Mr. Utano and Mr. McDonald. Am I correct?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, for the question. So you are correct.
Yes,
I have not heard.
Thank you.
No. I have not heard the question. I'd like to say on what you are correct. I have not heard the proceedings. I'd like to explain why.
I asked you, ma'am. This is my time. Or Utano threatening Diane. Are you saying no? No. Okay. Who then were you suggesting was threatening
Just
her?
generally speaking.
What evidence were you relying on?
None.
Who told you to use that line of attack?
Nobody. I was making sure that Ms. Daly did not feel, because she was uncomfortable to participate into the investigation.
Because she already laid out her position. So why does she need to participate in an optional meeting that you kept stressing was no longer optional? In fact, what really disturbs me is Ms. Daly specifically asked you, I want evidence. I want policy. I want written direction. I want something official that compels me to participate in a meeting that I'm not comfortable with. You agreed that you would provide that, and in fact, you didn't. So why didn't you provide policy?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I did, in fact, got these policies, and I looked at them. When I looked at them, I realized that the meeting was very strongly mandatory for her under the policies that I reviewed. The reason why I did not provide those policies to Ms. Daly is because, as I explained previously, I was genuinely trying to offer my offer. When I got a hold of this policy, she had already accepted to meet with the CBSA. There was no point at that time for me to provide these policies.
I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. You're trying to portray yourself as being really kind to your employees. An employee expresses reservation, concern, feeling pressured to participate in an interview that she doesn't want to do. She asks you a legitimate question. Give me evidence of policy. You find policy and you deliberately withhold it from her.
Thank you,
Not
Mr.
good
Brock.
enough.
Thank you, Mr. Brock. Next
Mr.
is
Druin, I'm all about accountability. Maybe you're not, but I am.
Order. Next is Mr. Erskine Smith.
I guess I'm going to start with you're coming in after the fact, and you are part of the investigation by the sounds of it. You've started to articulate your version of the MS Teams meeting. What could possibly have happened during that meeting for Ms. Daly to think that she was being pressured to provide false testimony? Is there anything at all in your recollection? What could she possibly be pointing to?
Mr. Chair, I would prefer not to speculate on Ms. Daly's motivations to feel pressure. Like I explained earlier, when the investigator from the CBSA contacted me, he explained that there were gaps in the facts that he was trying to put together to have the investigation completed. And his motivation was to access a witness who could presumably fill in those gaps. My motivation was to ask for the cooperation of Ms. Daly as a witness as part of this investigation. So that conversation, again, I don't know why Ms. Daly, and I don't want to speculate as to why Ms. Daly took away that she was being pressured to make a false testimony. I don't know.
How did GC Strategies, this two-person company, get access to such a significant catalog that makes mandatory government-wide purchasing?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. There are many, many suppliers on that list, on that catalog, and in order, when a specific need arises from a government department, what happens is that from that list, a request for proposal is asked.
But how does someone get on the list? Because I think that's part of the problem that I think this committee, at least I'm seized with, because if you become pre-qualified for this catalog and then you're a two-person company and then you start getting millions of dollars worth of contracts, nobody reviews it, then all of a sudden you're a made millionaire and taking money out of the public service.
Okay.
That's my perception as to what took place. Is there any recommendations you'd make in regards to the TBIPS program that could close this loophole that allows two-person companies like GC Strategy to continue to siphon public dollar?
So thank you very much for the question. So in fact, there are many recommendations that were made both by the Auditor General of Canada and by the Procurement Ombudsman. We're acting on them all. They pertain to methods of supply such as this one that you've described. And one of the recommendations is to shift from task-based types of methods of supply to solutions-based methods of supply. So what does that mean? It means that upfront, the scope or the requirement is very well defined to seek for vendors.
Thank you very much. I'll turn now to Mr. Genuis. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Chair, part of the Arrive scam scandal is that we are seeing this intense and bitter conflict between senior public servants. Senior officials accusing each other of lying, of falsifying evidence, even of faking major illnesses. And we have a similar dynamic today where we have witnesses whose testimony conflicts with the statements of Ms. Daly. And I want to just observe that whoever you find more convincing, the fact of this intense conflict within the ranks of the senior public service is a major problem. It's a problem that this division exists, that people can't trust each other, that someone is lying, and that whoever's responsible is not owning up to the problem. Now, we had heard testimony along the way that Minister Mendicino wanted someone's head on a platter over the Arrive scam scandal. This is obviously a massive boondoggle. The investigations at committee had started, and the implication of the testimony we heard about wanting someone's head on a platter is that Minister Mendicino was looking for a fall person, someone to carry the blame, someone within the public service to take responsibility for the disastrous Arrive Can procurement. He wanted to hold someone else responsible. And it seems to me that just looking at the timelines that there really was an emergence of and an intensification of conflict among senior public servants after this directive from Minister Mendicino came down, an informal directive, but after he said that he wanted someone's head on a platter. And I would just observe as well that we've seen the conflict between what you might describe as the Min-Doan faction and the McDonald-Utano faction. So I think this kind of plays into the questioning of Diane Daly and her allegation that she was sort of supposed to say certain things about who was responsible, and she didn't say the things she was expected to, and therefore people went after her. So I want to ask a few questions about this. When did you first decide to interview Ms. Daly? When did you reach out to her and say, we need to talk to you about this?
Thank you very much for the question. So I reached out to Ms. Daly, as I said earlier, on December 14th, after I was asked to ask her to cooperate with the investigation.
So I just thank you, and I just want to observe that was after the McDonald-Utano testimony, where they basically came out with very strong criticisms of Min-Doan and other senior public servants. So you were asked to interview Ms. Daly after Mr. Utano and McDonald had already kind of separated themselves from the narrative being advanced by other officials. Can you confirm that during her hearing with you, Ms. Daly accused Min-Doan of lying and said that Min-Doan was responsible for the decision to choose GC Strategies?
Thank you very much for the question. No, I cannot remember that, and this was not an interview. This, in fact, was a meeting, and I never interviewed Ms. Daly. I was not part of, and I am not part of either investigation, neither that of CBSA nor that of PSPC.
We have it in the transcript that Ms. Daly did say that Min-Doan had lied, and she did say that he was responsible for the decision to choose GC Strategies. She further said that Min-Doan had ruled out Deloitte as an option for GC Strategies because of issues with CARM. And that is consistent with testimony that was given by Misters McDonald and Utano, although it contradicts testimony given by Min Doan and by the leadership of CBSA. So I don't know if you can confirm that or not, but that's in the transcript that we received.
So thank you very much for the question. No, I cannot confirm that. I don't recall this, and I have not heard the transcript nor read the transcript, so I don't recall that.
Okay, it's there and members have it. But what was clear to me is that Ms. Daly's testimony conformed to the version of events that we heard from Cameron McDonald and Mr. Utano. It conflicted with the events that we heard from Min Doan, and statements by the senior leadership of CBSA confirms what Min Doan's supported what Mr. Doan's statement was. So you have these two conflicting stories, and the problem is that people who support one version of events continually get forms of pressure. They get put on leave, in some cases leave without pay, whereas people who support the other version of events don't face the same kind of consequences.
Question, Mr. Genuous.
We're trying to make sense as a committee, and I'd just be curious for your comments on this, of why, while an investigation is supposedly still ongoing, you have this conflict between senior officials, and one faction is facing penalties already, and the other faction is not, when the investigation is supposedly going on. Doesn't that suggest kind of a problem?
Thank you very much for the question. I don't want to, I'm not part of any of those factions, and I don't want to speculate as to the motivations of those individuals. I also would like to go back to the words, to a question earlier that I used in that meeting with Ms. Daly, specifically the word targeted. What I was trying to convey...
Actually, Ms. Budzik, I know you're going to have a chance to answer that. We are over the time, and I give witnesses the chance to answer the question posed to them. I'm sure this is going to come up on the next round or soon thereafter. Ms. Yip, you have the floor, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming. And I'd like to direct my questions to both of you, if you could answer Mr. Schoenberg as well. Could you please tell us how long you've worked with Diane Daly, and what was the working relationship like?
Thank you very much. I'm going to start and then ask Mr. von Schoenberg to step in. So, Ms. Daly, from the record, not from my recollection, came back to PSPC as a department in summer 2023. So I began working for the procurement branch about 6 months prior, so in November or a few months prior to that, so November 2022. So she came back through my hierarchy a couple of months after I had joined the procurement branch. Like I explained earlier, I had not met personally with Ms. Daly until I reached out to her for that meeting of December 14, 2023. Following that meeting, I kept in touch as related to the investigations with Ms. Daly, but for no other purpose than that. So I have a couple of meetings with her in my records where I checked in on her between December 14, 2023 and March 12, 2024.
That it was a good relationship, or was it contentious or tense?
Thank you for the question. It was like a business relationship, and I didn't feel that there was anything particular about meeting with her on the few occasions that I had to meet with Ms. Daly. She expressed, like I said, reticence. She had expressed that to participate in the investigation. She was forthcoming with that. She was also forthcoming about her personal situation. I felt empathy for her, for what she was going through. I also felt empathy for Ms. Daly about the fact that she needed to appear as a witness in an investigation given her personal circumstances, but nothing more. I had not heard, and the question was asked before, that her work was inadequate at all through my time.
Okay. And Mr. Schoenberg?
Yes, thank you for the question. So Ms. Daly was part of my directorate between July 29th, 2023 until the time of her being placed on administrative leave in March. Ms. Daly was a member of our Facility Maintenance Services Contracting Division, in which she undertook the procurement and contract management for service contracts related to building services such as elevators, fire alarms, HVAC equipment, that sort of thing. I had very little direct contact with Ms. Daly. I did participate in some division and team meetings with her. My understanding from her manager that her performance was entirely satisfactory. There were no concerns about her behavior, her contact with other individuals, or her contact with clients. Thank you.
Did you read the Auditor General's report on ArriveCan?
Yes, I did.
Do you agree with her findings and recommendations?
Yes, I do personally, and we do as a department. We've welcomed the recommendation, and in fact, the department has acted upon many of them. And those that are left to act upon, we've begun acting upon them. Same with the recommendations from the procurement ombud. So there were a couple of studies, reviews, and reports from the Auditor General. So yes, we welcome those recommendations.
Mr. Schoenberg? And you? Did you read the Auditor General's report?
Yeah, my apologies. I have read the report. I'm familiar with the findings of the report, and I would echo what Ms. Balduc has said. I agree with the findings of the report. I would, however, reiterate that I am not involved in professional services contracting. The contracting I do is generally of a different nature. We very rarely use task-based contracts. So I think the context is somewhat different, but there are certainly elements of the report that can be taken as general advice and can help us. And I think improvements are being made overall in procurement branch as we look at the findings of that report and implement some of those changes. Thank you.
Was there anything in the report that you found concerning?
So the report definitely highlight the need for better contract management. So and they also highlight the need for better documentation of not just the procurement process, but also the contract management phase of the procurement life cycle. So in those specific areas, again, like we've taken action. So for example, my new team has already put in place new templates to support our clients procure professional services. New checklists as well were put in place to act upon those recommendations from both the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombud. We've also strengthened our governance as a department. So there's, for example, new governance bodies within PSPC that have emerged at a high level to oversee procurement contracting. There's a new position for quality review as pertains to documentation. I know also that already many files, and we were involved, were already reviewed by this new position for quality review and documentation within the procurement branch. If I'm not mistaken, 266 files already have been reviewed since April.
Thank you, Madame
this
Bolduc.
way.
Members can pick that up again. Suivant, up next is Mr. McCauley for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Your briefing that you received before this committee, were you given briefing documents?
No.
Just a verbal briefing only?
That is correct. So essentially...
Okay. No, that's all I need to know if there weren't anything else. Who instructed you to contact Ms. Daly to start this whole ball rolling?
So HR, so the Human Resources Unit contacted me. So I believe it was a director in Human Resources who was aware that the investigation unit...
Contact someone at your level to contact Ms. Daly. Why not Mr. von Schoenberg?
Yeah.
Why would HR not do this themselves?
Thank you for the question, and it's a good question, actually. It could have been Mr. von Schoenberg. I know the people within Human Resources. I've worked with them quite...
How many other affairs such as this have you got personally involved in at this level of people relatively lower down the
At least
ladder?
2 others that I can think of, yeah.
2. You don't find it odd that HR would contact you? about this?
So,
Do you know,
thank you very much for the question. No, I actually know those people
do you know
within.
why specifically she was suspended or put on admin leave?
No, because I'm not part of that investigation, so I don't.
But you testified earlier that you're hands-on, you're a caring person, you wanted to be involved, and you followed up with her. You said, but you didn't follow up when one of your people was suspended, and about the reasons why she was suspended.
I actually had interactions with her after she was suspended. She asked questions about.
But you never asked why she was suspended? Whose decision was it to suspend her? It was made within PSPC, so.
It was, yeah. But it was not my decision, but I did carry it as her superior.
You were promoted 2 weeks after her suspension. When did you apply for this promotion or put your name in for the promotion?
So, thank you very much for the question. This was not a promotion. I want to be super clear there. Although I know that it was said that it was a promotion, I was already a director general. I was already an EX3. I had been for a while.
Did you put your name in for this, or they just plucked you out of the air for this role?
So I was asked to stand up.
Asked by who?
Asked by my boss. So
Who's your boss? When I ask who, I'm asking for names, please, just for the future.
So my boss is the ADM, Dominique Laporte, and he asked if I would undertake the transformation of professional services. And as several reports from the audit.
You repeatedly said that when they contacted you, it was about gaps in the gaps in the story. What were those gaps?
Thank you for the question. I don't know because I'm not part of the investigation. But again, as documented through audits that are public, there were gaps in the procurement and in the contract management for RIFCAN.
Do you know what those gaps were?
So specifically as part of the investigation, no, I'm not part of the investigation.
Let me ask you something. It's very, the narrative here is very strange. One of the things that the PSPC and Mr. Fleur seems to be going after Ms. Daly on is, this email, this creative writing that somehow that she had some role in selecting GC strategies. Someone at her level would not have been able to do that. Now, who was responsible for signing off on a NSC, the National Security Exemption they seem to be putting on Ms. Daly?
So I don't know because I was not part of the procurement process at the time.
Are you aware that the person who signed off on it was Ms. Reza, who is now, of course, the Deputy Minister?
I was not.
Do you find it odd that they seem to be targeting someone who is a PG05 very far down the very far down the ladder for this when legally it's the ADM at the time, Ms. Reza, who is accountable and responsible for signing the national security exception?
So I was not aware of that, and I don't want to speculate on odd or not.
But you understand how odd this is, that somehow this, like the government cannot put out a tweet without 20 people approving it, and yet somehow Ms. Daly, far down the totem pole, somehow pushed a sole source into GC strategies when the ADM was the one who actually signed the exception, and yet it's all due to this lower level mastermind who pushed it toward GC strategies. Do you not find this narrative hard to believe?
So thank you for the question. I don't want to speculate.
In my perspective, the TBIS program is a system that has largely allowed for these brutal companies like GC Strategies to have ever gotten in the door to public procurement that takes good jobs away from public servants. And we've heard this many times at this committee already. The TBIS program has someone in charge of it. It has somebody who makes a decision related to who gets on that list. Who is that person?
Thank you very much for the question. So there's a team, like I explained earlier, who assesses proposals that are received on a quarterly basis for each and every one of those methods of supply, TBIS being one of them.
And what's the name of this unit?
So the name of this, so it's directorate, and it's called the PSD, so Professional Services Directorate. That's simple. Yeah.
And who is the leader of this?
Currently me. To transform it, I'll say that what you've just stated we have recognized, and it's been said at committee, that we need to make changes. So specifically, I'm
So it's a
asking
problem. You'd agree
changes.
that the TBIS program allowed for what in this case is either a convenient loophole for small predators like GC Strategies to take advantage of millions of dollars of government contracting, or at worst, it is a coordinated criminal effort that would allow for bribes, that would allow for fancy dinners, that would allow for preferred access by certain individuals that would align themselves with groups like GC Strategies. It's either one of the two, correct?
So thank you very much for the questions. So again, we recognize that we need to modernize. We've already started modernizing. We've brought in several changes to those methods of supply.
With that, and I fully agree and commend the work related to the rebuilding of the program.
Okay.
What's important to understand in any mistake, particularly systems failures like this, I classify this as a massive system failure. And in your work to try to rebuild it, we need to understand how these things went wrong. The Auditor General found instances where high-level officials were taken out to dinners, were given preferential treatment to GC Strategies. Do you think that that in any way, shape, or form could have determined the outcome of GC Strategies getting onto a list like TBIPS that allowed them access to millions of dollars of government contracts?
So thank you very much for the question. GC Strategies must have, I wasn't there at the time, made a proposal and gotten onto the list, the supplying arrangement. That's
little groups like this, the GC
Thank
Strategies
you, Mr.
able to get on a
Desjardins.
list like this?
Mr. Desjardins, thank you.
Chance
You
for the
will
question.
have another opportunity. You'll be able to pick it up. I'm going to give you a full 2.5 minutes for your final turn. Ms. Kuzi, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. In her opening statement, Diane Daly stated she felt intimidated and attacked during the internal investigation currently going on at CBSA. She used phrases such as, "I'm very concerned that if I tell the truth here, I'm going to lose my job." She also stated that I have been muzzled for some time now. In the same opening statement, Ms. Daly stated, despite assurances from my Director General and Senior Director at the CBSA, that the CBSA was not investigating me. ATIP records show PSPC began investigating me on December 11th, 2023. She states, I haven't had federal authorization to do procurement from 2018 through 2023. I'm currently on administrative leave from Public Works. Can you please explain why Ms. Daly was told she was not being investigated when she is now part of the agency's internal investigation process and has since been interviewed?
Thank you very much for the question. Ms. Daly still is not under investigation by the CBSA, is my understanding. Again, I'm not part of those investigations. I can confirm that there is an investigation at PSPC. At the time that the statements were made by myself to Ms. Daly, she was a witness into an investigation, so the statements that I made to her were accurate and true when I made them on December 14, 2023.
If Ms. Daly did not have any federal authorization to be involved in procurement, can you explain why Christian Firth named her as the individual in the CBSA that helped him negotiate the terms of his own contract?
Thank you very much for the question. No, I can't. Mr. Firth and Ms. Daly would have to speak for themselves on that.
If you suspected Ms. Daly of misconduct in the procurement of the Arrive Can application, why was she given procurement authority once again in July of 2023?
Thank you very much for the question. Again, I did not suspect Ms. Diane Daly of anything at the time because I was not there, was not part of the procurement branch at the time. And when she returned to the department, in July 2023, there was no such thing as an investigation on Ms. Daly at that time.
Daly also stated, Madame Bolduc, that 2 weeks after she was placed on leave, you, as her former Director General, were appointed Director General of the new Professional Service Transformative Solutions sector on March 27th, 2024. You've corroborated positively with this today. So it would appear that this position was created and given to you because you helped to generate a false set of reprisals against Anthony Utano, Cameron McDonald, and Diane Daly, as they claimed. What would you have to say to that, please?
Thank you very much for the question. As I explained, this was a lateral move. I was previously Director General. I was asked to step into an area of procurement where help was needed. Hence why I accepted the position as Director General to transform the professional services. Again, there were several reports from the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombudsman that identified a need to modernize, to transform, and I stepped in to the job.
Did you receive an increase in salary or substantive level in this new position?
Thank you very much for the question. Not at all.
You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the group here is aware, but Canada's Public Servants Disclosure Protection Act, which provides whistleblower protection, was ranked last year comparative to 50 other countries. This government was given an opportunity to update whistleblower protections back in 2017, but accepted none of the Government Operations Committee's recommendations to improve whistleblower protections. And finally, the Bloc, of course, my colleague to the left, put forward a piece of legislation to improve whistleblower protections, which is now being held up in the Senate and which was filibustered for weeks by the Liberals. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, the testimony we were receiving here today from Madame Bolduc corroborates with the idea that, frankly, public servants are not safe in speaking the truth in this Liberal government. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Was it common practice to meet with prospective vendors and contractors off-site, to your knowledge?
Thank you very much for the question. No.
No. And Mr. Von Schonenberg?
No, it's not
did
regular
you do
practice.
That in your practice at all? No. Would you consider meeting with prospective contractors outside of the office to discuss contract requirements or details to be normal practice?
Thank you very much for the question. No, it's not.
And you? And neither one of
Same
you have
answer.
ever done that? Okay. Did you or any of your colleagues meet with Mr. McDonald or Mr. Utano to discuss developing the RFP or otherwise?
Thank you very much for the question. Never.
No.
I don't know either of these people, and I've never met with them or interacted with them.
And Mr. Bond?
I was not involved in any way in the Arrive Canada procurement or project.
Okay. So, again, even though you may not have been directly involved, I'm sure because this has been so public, you're probably a bit aware of the controversy. So would you consider the terms of the contracts that ended up being awarded to GC Strategies as restrictive?
Thank you for the question. What do you mean by restrictive?
Well, do you think maybe the terms were so restrictive that very few companies might have been eligible to respond?
So thank you for the question. I believe this is actually one of the findings of the Auditor General, that it was restrictive. Yes.
Right. And Mr. Von Schulenberg?
I'm not familiar enough with the terms of the contract to comment on that.
Okay. Now, do either of you know who at the PSPC made the decision to select GC Strategies?
Thank you very much for the question. No, I don't.
Don't?
No, I don't.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask this question. I think I know the answer. Have either one of you been contacted by the RCMP regarding any of this?
Thanks for the question. No.
No.
No, I have not.
Okay. Now, there have been many meetings on this. We've had well over 20 here at this committee, and it's been before other committees as well. So I'm not sure how closely you've been following it, but I suspect you might have. Is there anything that's been said over the many meetings and witness testimonies on this issue over the last several months that you disagree with or would like to clarify?
Thank you for the question. So I watched several of the committees, both OGO and PACP. Definitely, we're here today to say that we take exception to the testimony that was made on August 7 by Ms. Daly. Strong exception, in fact. And that's about what I would have to say on what was said in those committees.
So you reviewed testimony thoroughly, like you weren't there, but you've reviewed the transcripts and everything, and you're familiar with what she said.
Thank you for the question. Actually, I listened to it on the night of.
Oh, live.
And that's not actually live right after, because I was made aware that my name was mentioned on several occasions during that testimony. Hence, I watched the meeting, and that's essentially from my recollection of what I watched on August 7 that I'm speaking here today.
Mr. von Schoenberg, were you there with her, Ms. Daly, when she was testifying? Were you with her?
The only interaction I had was on that December 14th meeting when Lisanne and I met with Ms. Daly to stress upon her the importance of her participation in the CBSA investigation.
Okay, so are you familiar at all with her testimony? Have you heard it or seen the transcript or anything?
I'm familiar with her testimony at this committee. I watched that transcript, or I watched that tape after I was made aware that my name had been raised.
Okay, and do you have any concerns over her testimony? Like, did it?
Likewise, with Ms. Bolduc's testimony, I take exception to her interpretation of the events. I don't know why she felt that way. I can reiterate that at the meeting that we had, there was nothing that I felt was said that was intended to intimidate her. If she took it as intimidation, that's extremely unfortunate.
So given that she was a union member, if she were feeling so intimidated or pressured or treated unfairly, why would she not have filed a grievance? That would be the normal course. She was represented with a union steward or someone at this interaction, was she not?
The question, no, she came to Tom and I, who were her superior, to meet with us unaccompanied. At that meeting, she asked whether she could be accompanied by her union to meet with CBSA investigators. And as we explained earlier, I welcomed, I didn't know if she could or not. I needed to check into that. But I welcomed her suggestion. I looked into it. And in fact, she was told that, yes, she could be represented at the meeting with the CBSA should she wish to. She chose to be accompanied by a family member instead. That too we looked into, and that too we found that it was acceptable to the CBSA investigators. So in fact, she was accompanied by a family member.
Thank you very much. That is the time, I'm afraid. Beginning our fourth and last round, Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
For the benefit of Canadians following this scandal, let's recap what's happening here. Diane Daly, a low-level, faithful public servant for almost 20 years with no administrative or discipline record, gets investigated, gets suspended because she does not pinpoint Utano and McDonald as being responsible for this $60 million boondoggle. And surprise, surprise, within weeks of her suspension, you get asked to take on more responsibility. Now, you say there's no extra pay with that, but it's a higher profile. And I'm sure you've been bonused. Have you been bonused, ma'am?
Thank you very much for the question. No. And in fact, I have fewer employees in my new role.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Schonenberg, you were responsible for signing off on an ATIP. ATIP A-2003-00431, requested by Cameron McDonald for emails sent and received from Diane Daly, Ms. Bolduc, and yourself regarding keywords, CBSA, investigation, interviews, any and all participation between December the 11th, 23 to the present date, February 16, 24. You then, on the 19th of February, 24, provide an interesting commentary in your response from the PSPC. The matter to which this relates, the investigation, could result in future litigation. So Mr. McDonald, through the legal channels of going through an ATIP, does not receive the information you request because you're protecting it. So I'm asking, why is the PSPC hiding documents that are legitimately being asked for, and who gave you that direction at PSPC?
No one gave that direction. The recommendation form is exactly that, a recommendation form. It's common to indicate that there could be potential litigation associated with a file when providing documents. It is the ATIP office within PSPC that makes the determination of what should be released or what should not.
I call that obstruction of justice, and deliberately withholding key relevant information. Now, for the benefit of Canadians, let's recap what has happened through this entire scandal. I know you're shaking your head because you don't agree with it, Ms. Bulldog, but this is exactly what happens. We have ministers denying any and all responsibility. We got a corrupt prime minister denying any and all responsibility for this boondoggle of $60 million.
Point of order, Mr.
We've got
Speaker.
deputy
Point of order,
ministers.
Mr. Chair. Point of order.
Yes,
I know our honourable colleague was a former prosecutor. He knows using language like corruption is a criminal offence. There's been no criminal investigation to the Prime Minister. I would ask him to retract those comments. And if he wants to get into an investigation,
Mr. Dre,
we have two witnesses and get on with questions
gentlemen, cease. So, Mr. Dre, I do try to maintain decorum. I do also try to give members latitude. And when I hear words in this committee that are permitted in the chamber, I do let them go as kind of the reference point. So, Mr. Brock, you have, and that is by the chamber. I mean the House of Commons. Mr. Brock, you have the floor again.
We have presidents, we have deputy ministers who have deliberately lied and obstructed our ability to get to the truth. And then we have two individuals who called out the lies. Mr. McDonald, Mr. Utano, immediately suspended without pay. Now that's been resolved, the pay issue. They're still suspended because of the use of counsel. And then we have Diane Daly. Again, does not corroborate or put in those missing pieces of the evidence that you refer to. Lo and behold, a 20-year career up in shambles. Now she's suspended because she's not towing Justin Trudeau's line that no one higher up than these low individuals were responsible for choosing Christian Firth and GC strategies. How many other individuals are going to face similar fate? No wonder no one wants to talk about the practices at CBSA. We heard from the CBSA union president who talked about a culture of corruption at the CBSA because people are afraid to talk out and call out the abuses of integrity. That's a real problem with the public service. And everyone is trying to protect Mindone. Mindone, who deleted 4 years' worth of emails, crucial emails, 20,000 emails. Was he suspended? No, he was not. He is on a leave. Everyone is trying to protect him. This is a massive cover-up, and this is inexcusable. Canadians are watching, and you two individuals are part of the cover-up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Turning now to Mr. Erskine Smith, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I'm new to this committee, so forgive me for not being quite as certain as Mr. Brock, and in part because, and I just want to, before I get to trying to figure this out a little bit on my own terms, Ms. Bulldog, just one last time, your involvement in this has been engaging with Ms. Daly on December 13th, December 14th, and subsequent to that, in the course of, in your words, assisting her in the course of, or providing some support in the course of the investigation where she was the subject of the investigation in some manner. Do you have any other involvement in GC strategies in this ArriveCAN and the investigations otherwise? Do you have any involvement?
Thank you for the question. No, I don't.
Okay, so I'm interested, Mr. Brock. I'm interested in you listed off some concerning facts there around deleted emails. I don't know enough about it, so I'm interested in getting to the bottom of that. Garnett, you said there's two competing stories. Fair point. I mean, the idea that we have a low-level faithful public servant, though, is belied a little bit by what I've seen, but maybe I got it wrong. I mean, I have seen, you've got Ms. Daly is the she comes over. Her previous boss had been Mr. McDonald. She gets pulled over when Utano and Mr. McDonald are at CBSA. She gets pulled over into CBSA to specifically help with procurement. She reports to Mr. Utano, who reports to Mr. McDonald, as my understanding. And then Mr. Firth, who doesn't answer anything until he's called to the bar, who does he name? He names Ms. Daly. I mean, for me to be comfortable with any of this, to clear anyone, I mean, I would have to have the emails between Ms. Daly and Mr. Firth. I would have to have the proposal that was in front of Mr. Min and have a much more serious understanding of the communication between all players before the approval of GC strategies was made. If we've got that, let's go through it. But my understanding is there are 2 investigations underway where the RCMP and others are able to get to the bottom of this in a way that we are unable to. I'm deeply concerned with us leveling accusations. I mean, I don't know anything about Ms. Bolduc, but the idea that she pressure or threatened anyone, where's the evidence?
Is the concern of companies like GC Strategies, Coradix, these other random players, to be just really frank, in terms of if you had to look at a list and you've seen Amazon Web Services, you've seen Microsoft, you've seen big corporations bidding on these government contracts, but then say, well, we're going to go pick this 2-person company, GC Strategies, to just dole out a bunch of money, and that's it, and it's going to go under no periodic review. That seems to have been the process, even though there's good policies in place. I reviewed the policies in TBIPS. Why weren't they followed and why weren't they enforced?
Thank you very much for the question. So, as I've explained previously, we've already put in place measures to address concerns.
No, sorry. I'm trying to understand what happened in the ArriveCAN situation. The Auditor General tables a report. It's our committee's job here to understand how she comes to findings that are incredibly damning, concerns that Canadians have. Her office found that there was evidence of instances where people were being taken out to fancy dinners and lunches. She in her report suggests that in addition to these fancy dinners and lunches, that they were known personally to individuals within the public service. My question is, how is it possible that the rules which are in place, which outright ban and say no way can a public servant be meeting with these people inside of a restaurant, took place? Where was the critical system failure? How do we fix the critical system failure? That's largely your job, to fix that system. Can you give us confidence that you understand the issue so that can be actually fixed? Is a company like GC Strategies able to do what they did again, but do you understand how they did it?
So thank you very much for the question. Again, I was not part of the procurement process at the time of ArriveCAN.
View of what happened at TBIPS, now that you're reforming it seems like a big job. It's really important that you, as the official there, understand precisely what went wrong, whether that was within enforcement, within the initial procurement. Was there an individual or set of individuals that were bribed, that were taken to dinners, that got GC Strategies on there? I'm not saying that happened. I'm saying that's a really hard fact to miss in the Auditor General's report that deeply concerns me. How do we, or what is your understanding of what took place to get GC Strategies on a list of preferred contractors? How was that made possible?
So one of the new measures that's in place currently is that vendors are required to adhere to a code of conduct. It is part of mandatory clauses that are part of our contracts now. And so I can't speak for the behavior of individuals or vendors in that respect, but certainly, like you said, the policies and the procedures are in place.
Thank you. That is the time, I'm afraid,
for the
Mr.
TBIPS
Desjardins.
list.
Up next is Mr. Genuis. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Erskine-Smith said he noted that there are some documents that he'd like to have that would be useful. Of course, Conservatives would support any request for government documents that he would like to make that would further his understanding of this issue. So fire away. You won't have any opposition to that. Ms. O'Gorman met with PCO right before her testimony. To the officials here, did you meet with PCO at any point regarding the investigation that's happening or your testimony at committee?
For a question, never.
You've never met with PCO?
No, I have not met with PCO regarding this affair or the last time I met with PCO was actually when I was with Indigenous Services Canada. So I was not even with the Department of Procurement.
I'm going to come back to that, actually. But just in response to my earlier line of questioning, we have this internal investigation, allegedly. That internal investigation reports to the internal chain of command. That's what an internal investigation is. Meanwhile, though, we have an internal factional conflict between public servants who are accusing each other of lying, falsifying evidence. And that internal investigator reports to people who have already taken positions in the context of that internal conflict. That obviously raises significant concerns about the ability of that internal investigation to be genuinely impartial. So do you think that an external investigation, external to the CBSA, would help to clear the air more than the internal investigation?
So thank you very much for the question. There has been external investigations. The Auditor General did investigate, so did the Procurement Ombud. And in matters where internal investigations led to the need for the RCMP to get involved, my understanding is that the RCMP was asked to step in.
Right, but just to emphasize here, the Auditor General and the Procurement Ombud's work focus on some of the significant failures of the process, but they're not geared towards identifying individual culpability for things that have happened. The internal investigation appears very much to be investigating people with the view to hold people accountable. And yet that internal investigation is caught up in a factional conflict, which implicates the highest levels of CBSA. You have a minister saying he wants a head on a platter, and you have officials that are going back and forth over whose head it should be. In that case, insofar as there's a need to identify who was responsible for certain decisions, shouldn't that investigation happen external to the CBSA, not inside of the CBSA?
Thank you very much for the question. I cannot speak for the investigation that's occurring at the CBSA.
Okay. As you mentioned, you previously worked on Indigenous affairs. Part of the Arrive scandal involves abuses of Indigenous procurement. Have you been asking questions, or are you seeing investigation taking place into abuses of Indigenous procurement rules as part of what has taken place?
So I am aware that this particular department, who should speak for themselves for their responsibilities, that they conduct audits on companies, Indigenous companies. And
Okay.
also I'm aware that this particular department has the mandate of
Okay, I'm sorry, but I just want to drill into the work happening at CBSA. So if, as I suspect, rules around Indigenous procurement have been broken, is that part of the internal investigation, or is that entirely being left to other people who you hope are working on it?
very much for the question. Again, I'm not aware of what's being investigated by the CBSA, nor for that matter within PSPC, because I'm not part of those investigations. As I described earlier, internal investigations, there are walls between the units carrying them.
Okay.
And those
Sorry to jump in, but just Chair, given that that we are not hearing from these officials about investigations on Indigenous procurement, I'd just like to move that the committee report to the House that it supports recommendations from Indigenous leaders for an audit of Indigenous procurement. We've heard those requests from various Indigenous leaders for that audit of Indigenous procurement. We're not able to get answers on that today, and I think it's important that this, as the committee that's responsible for engaging the work of the Auditor General, would express its support for that call from Indigenous leaders for that investigation. So I don't think that will be that contentious, but I wanted to put it on the table, Chair. Thank you.